Welcome to Season 5 of Learning Unlocked. I'm your host, Britt Bingold. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I'm a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Before we get going today, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you have time to rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see and hear our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and you think others would too, please head over and provide us a review. Thanks. Welcome to episode 42 of Learning Unlocked. Today I am joined by Lindsay Wilson, one of our district's instructional coaches, to chat about creating opportunities to frequently collect student classroom data. Here's a little bit about Lindsay before we begin the interview. Lindsay has been in education for 17 years, 14 years in the classroom, 6 years in third grade, and 8 years in second grade. She has been an instructional coach for the last 2 years and is excited to continue that role this year. Prior to her instructional coach role, she has been a trainer on our campus for programs such as Right from the Beginning and Response to Text. Outside of work, or what I lovingly like to call my second shift when I go home, she is the mom to twin daughters who are absolutely her world. She also enjoys crafting, sewing, and baking. So really excited to have her on. Welcome to the podcast, Lindsay.
Thank you.
How has the school year been going for you so far?
Really well. Excited to start my third year coaching. I'm only at one school this year, which is great. So I feel like I can really get in and really learn and really perfect what I'm doing and help teachers.
So were you at 2 schools then?
Yes, I've had 2 schools the last 2 years.
Okay.
To split my time.
So it's been okay because you have one to focus on this year. That's super awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to talk today about one of your passions, which is collecting student data frequently in the classroom. So teachers spend the entire year collecting all sorts of data, right? Immediate and valuable information about students that informs and influences how they teach. We do it all the time. Teachers do it constantly. They just don't really necessarily write it down, right? So they will all of a sudden go to a student and be like, yeah, you need to do this, or hey, correct this. And then they'll be teaching and all of a sudden realize like, hey, no one's on track with me. We need to review or readjust or reteach. So it's one of those things that I feel like teachers naturally do, but we don't necessarily collect it. It's all like up in our heads. So I think throughout this podcast, we're just going to call it collecting kid data or kid data because that's really the most important data. I don't know if you would agree, but
I totally agree.
We need to know what these kids are doing, right? So what does it mean to collect kid data in the classroom?
So for me, when I think about data, we've got your standardized test, your end of unit exams, all of those are summative. They're all what happens at the end. But for the kid data is what I need all along that process so that I know if we're getting to the end.
Okay, right.
So it's, to me, it's quicker, it's quick to give, quick to analyze, and it focuses very specifically on our learning target, whatever we're trying to learn for the day. So that I can monitor all along if my kids are understanding what we're trying to do.
So it's more of those formative, but very timely.
Yes.
And at times very immediate. Data.
It's very actionable things that I can take at the data from my kids, the 1 or 2 questions, and I can do something with it the very next day.
Okay, so I feel like throughout this podcast, we're going to have a fight over data versus data because I say data and you say data, right? Okay, so listeners, so sorry, I can't get on the train. I always have said data, and now I'm just realizing this, so we're just going to have both versions happening today. Okay, sorry, that was totally a sidebar. I'm just realizing it as we're talking. So how is collecting kid data different than collecting that standardized testing data, or we had a final unit exam, or we did this testing that our district has us do? How is the kid data different than that data?
So the kid data is different because it's happening throughout. It's actionable. It's happening every day. So I did a lesson. I want to check right away. Did they get what I was doing? Can I go on to the next part, or do I need to redo what I did today? Because clearly it didn't happen.
Right.
So that's the very quick, actionable, something that I can do daily, do with each lesson if I need to make sure that we're on track, rather than waiting to an end of the unit, where then I've got to try and backtrack and figure out, okay, what lesson did they miss? Where did I lose them? So that I can now get them back on track. I want to try and catch them before they're lost.
Right. So it's really taking time to stop and see what they're doing before we progress.
Yes.
Okay. So how frequently should a teacher be collecting kid data?
Every lesson, every day. I know, not the popular answer, but I really am thinking very quick data. But, if you think about when you look at a standard and you plan it for your kids, you're going to break it down into small parts.
Right.
So those parts are important. I picked them out because they need to know that. So if I don't stop and check and make sure that they've gotten this part, how do I know they're ready for the next part?
Right.
And so I want to monitor each time I do an activity. It can be something very quick. It's usually one question, one activity on a whiteboard, but something so that I know, do I need to kind of reevaluate and teach what we did today, or can we move on to the next part?
I like that you said something really quick, because I feel like teachers, it's a time thing, right? Like, I don't have time. When am I going to fit this in? So it's a quick check. And we're going to get to some examples later, but it's something small that they can manage, right? And we've been really pushing in our district and even on the podcast, teaching with short bursts of information and then doing an active experience. And so within that active experience can be
that's
data,
your check,
right? Like that's where your check should go. And then you continue on and or modify, adjust, go back to where, okay, these kids need me to reteach that. So, but it should be small then.
Yeah, definitely. When I think of kid data, I'm not thinking of assessments.
Okay.
It's not a test. It's not a quiz. It is a literal 1 or 2 question quick check on if they're with me for today.
Yeah, it's almost, we need to name it something like mini, not assessment, but mini. You know what I mean? Like a little, like a mini burst of information. So maybe by the end we'll come up with something that we can call it. But yeah, collecting that kid data, it should be something mini, right? And so you said that every lesson is important. So often when they build on each other, if something isn't tracking for a student, and you get that check, what do you do?
So to me, it would be based on how many kids are not getting. If the majority of my class came back and they had no idea what I was asking them to answer on our quick ticket, that tells me I did something wrong. I need to reevaluate how I presented that. I need to redo it the next day.
Okay.
If I do the check and I get it back and we've got maybe 3 to 5, then I know the majority of the kids picked it up. So now I need to figure out how am I going to tackle these 3 to 5.
Okay.
So sometimes that could be the next day instead of while the class is doing regular warm up, those 3 to 5 are with me and we're kind of reviewing what we did the other day.
Right.
It could be something even that same day. Okay, we're about to split off into groups. I can see these guys are all good. These 4 really need to meet with me. So they're going to start with me before they go off into their independent activity.
Okay.
And so just trying to
So it just depends on how much or how many kids are just not on it. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about some methods. So to collect this kid data, what are some methods that you feel are the most accessible to teachers? Because again, as we know, teachers are very busy. There's 5 bazillion things happening. Kids are going to the bathroom. Kids are going back from everybody's looking at the kid that came back from the bathroom. Like they're just not with you necessarily all the time. We just got back from recess. We're trying to get through, like 5 subjects, specials. Okay, so we have this is super important, right? Like top tier, we have to monitor student progress towards mastery. So what are some accessible methods that you have found just in your own teaching experience, and also through coaching, that would be really easy to implement that could give them good kid data?
One of my favorites is exit tickets. I know everybody's heard of them, but they're such an easy thing to utilize to get that kid data. And there's so many ways you can do it.
Right.
You can post a question on the board. Kids can write, turn it into you. It could be a math problem. They solve the problem, turn it into you.
Right.
So I love they're super easy to prep. They don't take a lot of time in class, and they take less than 5 minutes usually for me to sort them out, and I can make a decision with what to do the next day. Yeah, because it's 1 or 2 things on the paper. I'm not doing a ton of things on there.
Okay. So an exit ticket cannot it just, I shouldn't say cannot, but really shouldn't be like a 5-question or more quiz.
I never did them that way.
Okay.
I wanted very direct to the point. Here's what I wanted you to learn today.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if you did it.
Okay.
So, like for some examples,
Yeah.
in second grade, we had, I wanted the kids to prove to me that they understood that if you have 10 ones, you have now made a 10.
Right.
And so I gave them each just a quarter sheet of paper. On the board, I drew 9 ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the students to write or draw for me, what happens if I put 2 more up there? And then I gave them about 4 minutes to do it on their paper. You know, I had one who didn't have anything in that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that they didn't get it. I didn't need to stress that child out to keep working further. It was
Right.
like, okay, awesome, put your name on it, we're good to go.
Yeah.
You know, I had others who just added, they put the 11 on there, but they didn't convert it, so I knew they weren't there with. I had others who right away drew the 10 and the extra 1. And so it really let me kind of see their process. So we did it, it was right before special. I collected them while the kids were at special. I went through and I made 3 piles. Completely got it, almost there, has no idea what I'm doing.
It's not on the ship. The ship is
right.
Not left the dock. Yeah, okay.
Yep. And so then I could use that. So for my lesson the next day, I planned my warm-up based off of that. I had enough kids who had it. I knew who I needed to pull and meet with, so I wanted to have time to meet with them before I went on to the next lesson.
Right.
So I planned a little different warm-up for the rest of the kids that day, so I had the time to start with that group.
Okay.
But it was just that one thing on the ticket, my point for the day. Could they tell me to make a 10?
Right. And so I'm thinking also for some older students, you could use something like a Padlet wall or a Jamboard, right, where they're putting
Absolutely.
up their stuff, and like that way they're also kind of using that tech that we have. Like we're very fortunate to have one-to-one. So even like I think like 4th, 5th, and 6th graders could easily use a Padlet
absolutely.
or a Jamboard and be able to. That way, the whole class, you could have the whole class see it, right? And you could even verbally give feedback off the screen, right?
Yeah.
As an exit ticket.
Coming in.
Because, you know, like when I think of exit tickets, and maybe I'm the only one that thinks this, but I always think it like you literally are giving it to them as they exit. But I think one of the most important things that, and I was so guilty of this, Lindsay, was I was crappy at closing lessons. I was the teacher that was literally yelling to them at the door, like, and blah, 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 remember, okay, like, I was just so bad at closing. So I feel like the exit ticket really could be a wind down. It doesn't have to be. It could be like, hey, post it on your way out on a Post-it note or whatever. Yeah. But it could be like a last 5-minute, let's take a breath, wind down. What do we know about today? Go through it together. You know, kind of, and that way you are ready for your warm up or when they come in or whatever. But I feel like we aren't always collecting kid data necessarily like in a closure setting. Like we're collecting it after they've left. And I think we can also collect it really while they're, you know, closing that lesson. I mean, obviously we're going to do it. We can do it any time of the lesson. But I feel like that last 10 minutes, if I went back into the classroom, I feel like I would have to put a timer on. I'd be like, okay, Brett, it's time to stop. You need to close this lesson. Right. Because it's like the most like important part is for those kids to be able to take everything that's in their brains and compile it down.
Yeah, stop and reflect.
Yeah, stop and reflect. So I like that maybe, you know, even though they're doing it on the way out, it could also be just as they're winding down. Right?
Yes.
Now it still count, right? As collecting kid data. Okay. I just wanted to throw that out there because I feel like too many times when we hear the word exit ticket, I think it has to be on the way out. Right. And it could just be a closure.
For sure.
Okay.
Well, I've seen a kindergarten example where it was actually the kids coming into class.
Oh, okay.
So kinder teachers really focused on letter sounds. They have so many
they
introduce each week.
Right?
At Foundations. And so she would take her letters for the week, like her most recent 5. And anytime the kids came back to class, she'd show them a card. They'd tell her the sound. Each kid on the way in. It took like 2 minutes for each kid to walk in and say the sound. And then as soon as the last kiddo went in, she had a clipboard right by the door. She went in, she just marked the kids who missed their letter. And that was it. Then she got in, she started her lesson. And I talked to her about it later, and she's like, yeah, I just do it Monday and Tuesday. That's at least 6 times by the time we go to special and recess and lunch. And so then I know who to pull the rest of the week. You know, these kids miss theirs every time. And I was joking with her, and I said, well, what happens if you can't remember how many missed it? And she's like, then I know I got to reteach the whole thing.
Right.
And then if I can't even remember to mark them down, then we know we have a bigger problem.
Right.
But that for her was the perfect way to check that. without taking up class time. It was just real quick, and they did it like 3 times a day. And after 2 days, she kind of knew who's getting their sounds and who's maybe still struggling.
Oh yeah, I need to do that with my kid. When he comes in from school. No, I'm just kidding, he would kill me. But he's in kindergarten and he needs to learn to sound, so I'm looking for any kind of things I can grab from kinder teachers.
Right, absolutely.
You said the word clipboard, and I don't know if you noticed, but I raised my hands in the air like I was at a concert. I feel like the clipboard is the most underutilized like kid data tool. And it seems so dumb, but it's just a simple clipboard with a roster of names that you're collecting this data. And I used it a lot when I was going just around to tables. So on my clipboard, I had all my tables with their names on the desks.
Sure.
Right? And so when I would visit a table of 4, I would kind of just mark, if I would, prompt a question, I would be able to see like, no, yes, no. And then I was able to mark it that way and then be able to pull those kids. I did the playing cards on the desks. Mm-hmm. So I had my hearts, my spades, whatever. And so, I would just be like, hey, can I have the heart over here in my corner from table 4, the spade over in my corner from table 5? They didn't really necessarily know why I was calling them over there in that way, but I was able to just grab them quickly without being like calling out their names, right? Mm-hmm. And just be like, hey, when I asked that question, you guys, I noticed blah, blah, blah. Can you just, clarify some things for me? Or can you tell me why you were thinking in the way you were thinking? Hey, where were you stumped on this? So the clipboard really is underrated because it's awesome easy to hold, move around the classroom, put a roster on it, you could put your seating chart on it, anything, and collect that data. Right, yeah, and make notes because I wouldn't remember. The thing is, I would visit those kids' tables all the time. Until I started using my clipboard to collect the data for myself. And this was before PLCs were data cycles. Like this was when we were still in PLCs were more like lesson planning time,
Sure.
And now that we've moved to data cycles, this would have been helpful. But just for my own knowledge, before I started using a clipboard, I'd get to the end of the day and I'd be like, I could not tell you who got it and who wasn't. Even though in that moment, and as a secondary teacher, in 4th hour, I knew. But by 7th hour, I had no idea. Because I was working with a whole different class with a different group of kids. So having that, just even writing notes to myself or symbols or something. But I think if, I know we have great tablets that you can flip. You know what I mean? And mark digitally. Sure. And I'm sure some people would be super great at that. And that would be a great way to do it. But I just feel like the clipboard.
I'm still old school enough. I would like the clipboard.
Yeah.
Yep, quick.
It might be kind of cool. In the doctor's offices where you have your computer on and they just wheel around.
Can we get that?
If you could figure out how to do that, that would be really convenient. But I don't know. The kids might be creeped out. You're just sitting there staring at them I don't know. When the doctor comes to the doctor's office and they're like, so what's your symptoms? And there's this person typing. You're this is intimidating. So I think the clipboard might be a little less intimidating. But yes, I think, teachers, if you're listening, grab a clipboard, throw your roster on it, and do like what you said, the foundations, and just check, sounds, or ask them some probing questions and see where they're at. Even when you're sorting, to put the data from the sort onto the clipboard.
Yeah, go through and highlight. Yeah. Green's here, blue's here.
Ooh, color coding. Yes, Lindsay, I love the color coding. Yeah, anything I think that has that effect where it's just simple and easy, and then you can just easily bring that to your PLC, which we're going to talk about later. But you can just bring that with you. Yeah. So, okay.
And I think when we talk about KIG data, that's what we mean. We're not talking about tests and assessments.
Yeah,
you are assessing your students all day long when you're teaching. Just some way to quickly document that so that you don't forget come the end of the day because we're fried and exhausted just like the kids are.
Right.
And then we need to plan what we're going to do with it. So anything quick like that is awesome, and it's going to just lend to your teaching and support your students' learning because you're keeping track of that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the clipboards, and I do love the exit tickets. So exit ticket wise, we could do index cards, we could do Padlet, we could do sticky notes. Have you seen teachers do anything else exit tickets that you thought were really that was fast and easy?
Mostly quarter sheets of paper and Post-its.
Yeah.
It's either questions they pose orally or something quick they write on the board.
Right.
But I think the point is that it is just that simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be any more than that.
Major prep.
Right? Most prep would be maybe I'll prep the sentence stem that I want the kids to use. Sometimes I would copy those and give it to them because, second grade, even just writing the stem could be a long time.
Right.
So if I knew we'd be quick, I would prep my quarter sheet with that already on it.
Okay. Or even like non-readers, visuals, maybe that you have on the sheet, like, maybe they're doing like tracking a story or something, right? And you've given them some visuals, what's first, middle, last, or something like that. You might have to prep a little bit more.
Right.
But for the most part, we really want these to be low prep so that they can be super frequent.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And then you have whiteboard check-ins.
I do. So whiteboard check-ins was another one I love to do. I say it's probably very similar to exit ticket. But for me, if I was teaching a lesson and I have the kids working on whiteboards while we were doing it, my last 1 or 2 questions of that time were going to be like my exit ticket. They were going to be my assessment. And so I could watch the kids while they were solving it or while they were, figuring out from their reading what they wanted to write on there.
Right.
And then from there, I could immediately adapt my instruction. So like they could be, okay, bring me your board when you're done. Awesome. Erase your board. Go have a seat at your table so you're ready for directions. Awesome. Your board looks great. Don't erase it. Go sit at my table. That's where you're going to be next. And so I could split my class right there.
Based on what was on their boards.
Yeah. Before going into the independent activity. Okay. And so, I already had planned, here's what they're going to do either with a partner or small groups, but independently afterwards. Right. But then I could, these
You're not just sending them off to do nothing?
Right. Nope. If there was a plan. I do have plans.
There's always a plan.
Yep. But those kids who were still struggling, I didn't want them to go off into independent practice doing it wrong. So if it was something that, like math comes to mind, I would do it a lot in math. But it was something like I wanted to see how they would solve it. Right. I wanted to catch them before they went off to practice it on their own. So for me, that whiteboard was perfect because I could see what they were doing usually. And then they, based on how they're answering, I can sort and I know who I need to talk to before I let them go off and practice independently. So I can make sure that they're practicing correctly. They're practicing the right skills.
So you for an example, you had that simplifying fractions example, right? So students would simplify the fractions on their board, and then like you said, you would have them go either independent practice, hey, you got this, but you don't want to send them off doing the wrong thing.
Right.
And I feel like sometimes even with homework that happens. We send them home, they don't know what they're doing. They do it wrong. They come back, they've practiced it wrong.
Right.
And now the teachers...
And then it's even harder to correct that because now they've practiced it wrong.
And entrance kid data, and we're like, just knocking our head against the wall. So I think I like that, and you can do that anytime in the lesson, really. So, and if they don't have a whiteboard, if they don't have the little whiteboards, I use...
Page protector, piece
of
paper in there.
I did that. So I had a page
laminated
protector,
piece of paper, I'll do it.
Laminated piece of paper. Okay, so there's different ways around, if you don't have this whiteboard or whatever whiteboard space.
Whiteboard markers erase off of desks. They can do it right on their desk.
Oh.
So just something that it's erasable, it's quick. I don't need them to have it forever.
Right.
I just need to get a feel for where you are.
Right.
So I know if I can let you go or if I need to meet with you first.
Okay. So if you call those kids, the kids that you called back to you after you do the whiteboard check, where would you notate that those are the kids that were needing extra help? Would you do that maybe on a roster somewhere?
Either a roster or sometimes even a Post-it note.
Okay.
I've always had Post-it notes by my table, so it might be, okay, I'm meeting with these 4 people today, so then we'd work together.
Here's what they were struggling with, and so maybe you could just check up and
just make some notes, and then I could move that into, my more permanent notebook, or if whatever file I'm keeping on my kiddos, if it was something that I needed to keep beyond just that day.
Okay.
Because sometimes it really is they just need to hear it from me 1 or 2 more times.
And
if they pick it up quick, and then it's like, okay, I don't need massive documentation on that.
Right.
They got it. They just needed 2 extra minutes with me.
Because I know I like to be super organized. I probably would have a little binder that this is my kid data binder, and here's my classes, and here's the things. But I have lovely colleagues who would be like, I don't have that, and I have 3 or 4 Post-it notes. Either way is fine, as long as you're remembering to somewhere document it, right? Because otherwise, if you're collecting it and you're not going to be able to remember it later, then there's an issue. Yeah. Right? Okay. And then they could even have it in a Google Doc if they have their computer up next to them or something. They could have a tracking Excel sheet if they have their own little way of doing it. Any way is great.
Yeah.
But they just some type of find your method, and it might take a couple tweaks, right? Of just trial and error.
For sure.
But
I feel like mine varied from year to year sometimes too,
yeah.
depending on the certain classes and the way they interacted. Sometimes there was faster methods, sometimes there was the pretty notebook.
Like,
so.
I don't have time. This is on the post-it note because I got Johnny
Post-it
in
note
the
is
corner.
in the lesson plan book, and we're good.
Yeah, right. Because I got Johnny in the corner dancing with his desk, and we have to go. Right, but there's different times, right? And the grade levels are different too, right?
For
like,
sure.
As a high school teacher, I had to kind of keep it with tabs because I had all those periods. Right, so it's like, okay, I needed to make sure like I had a first hour tab in my collection, and this was not anything that was going in the grade book.
Not usually.
So very rarely was any of my kid data going in the grade book, and I think explaining that to my students helped. Did you ever have students when you were giving an exit ticket or doing a whiteboard check or anything like that start like, is this going to be in the grade book or do I have to do like, was there any anxiety with it at first when you were introducing it with kids?
Some kids. I see it more now coaching as I get into older grades. The older they are, the more they're like, what's this going to be in the grade book?
Right.
And so I would tell them yes and no. This exact activity is not going in there. But the reason I'm checking is because if you can't do this, you're going to not get the end goal. So I need to know if you've got this part so that I can get you to our main learning goal that's on the board.
Okay.
Kind of thing. And so they would know it's important because it's building to that.
Right.
But no, this one particular ticket is not going in your grade.
Okay.
So show me what you know.
This is show me what you know. A lot of kids would maybe say, oh, I don't want to do it because I don't think if the teacher doesn't explain up front and talk the kids through, hey, we call this a learning goal. In other districts, they may be called objective or learning intention. It's all nuanced, whatever. But in our district, it's a learning goal, right? It's on the board. And then we've got success criteria. You could even tell the kid, well, right now we're working on a piece of that, right? Yeah. It's leading towards this end goal. I need you to do this so I know that you're on your way. Like, I need to know that. And I think as long as we're transparent with kids, for the most part, of course, you're always going to have the beloved
special friends.
Yep. Who are going to be like, I'm not doing that extra ticket. But you're always going to have those. Those outliers are going to exist. But for the most part, I think kids, if they know why they're doing what they're doing, they'll be like, oh, okay. I mean, I'd have kids write full paragraphs, right, in class. Sure. And I would, that as kid data, because I needed to see it. They'd have the class period to write it. They would maybe do it with a partner. It had to be done, 15 minutes before so I could look over it with them and give them immediate feedback. And, it was that pressure of, well, it's not perfect. I didn't revise it. Is it going to the grade book? I did it with a partner. No, okay, so we're just practicing. I just need to see your ideas. I need to see that your ideas are working together. I need to see that you've got some transitional steps, some sentences. How are you starting this paragraph? So once I told them, it's really just me checking, are you getting claim evidence warrant? Are you getting this idea of having supporting evidence or supporting argument or having a counter argument? I'm just seeing if you can write this way before we do the big essay, right? Where I'm going to put it in the grade book and you're going to write it on your own. It's like training wheels, it's before I can let you just ride that bike on your own. A lot of my freshmen were like, oh, because they are so used to, if I do it, it goes in the grade book. And really, we got to work that out of them a little bit.
For sure. And I think even younger kids will have anxiety over thinking something's going to be graded or going to be marked, and they can't necessarily verbalize that's what's stressing them out.
Right.
But when you see those behaviors, when you give them that ticket and they're starting to act out or they're playing, it's because they're uncomfortable with that.
Got it. Yeah.
And so I do think that explaining that to them and be like, this is just to show me what you know. I used to tell my kids, this tells me what to teach tomorrow.
Right.
If everybody got it, then I know I can go on. Right. If I look at this and see that a lot of you didn't, I know I made a mistake, and so I need to fix it tomorrow. Right. So this is helping me to know what I want to teach you tomorrow.
Right.
But that being open with them and letting them know this is why we're doing it.
And it's hard for some kids, to say hey, you haven't got it yet. I may tell the students, this paragraph is a, I was always grading on a 1 to 9 scale. So I'm like, right now we're at a 5. It's kind of, you're coming in and you're coming out. I can kind of see what you're doing. It's not quite there yet. And they would be like, oh, I'm like, here's our 2 things we're going to work on. Yep. We're going to get that. And by the end, we're going to get to that great grade. But it would relieve them so much of their anxiety. They were able to accept the struggle, I think, a little bit, or the idea that they didn't quite get a concept yet because they knew it wasn't the one and done, it's over.
They're going to have more chances.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. So with exit tickets and whiteboard check-ins, I think those are two really quick, accessible, like it doesn't have to be this like drawn out whole class period, kid data check, right? You don't have to have kid data day. Right?
Yeah, no, it's very quick, just what you're doing, checking how the day went. Kind of thing.
All right, perfect. So I saw we were talking about this and as a topic for the podcast, and I was like, yeah. And then I was doing social media and I saw this meme and it read, I used to tell people I was a teacher. Now I prefer the title Data Collection and Management Specialist. It's much more accurate. So the comments on this ranged from, this is why I left teaching. And I was like, oh, to, no, data is making a huge difference. Like, I am a data collection specialist because I need these kids to move forward. But it does feel like, I think for many teachers, and they're like, I want to just teach. I want to just go in my classroom and teach my lessons. And I know how my kids are doing, I know where they're at. I don't need to do this collection of data. So there's like I don't even know, like a beating of two heads, two different ways to think about this. Sure. So what are your thoughts on this meme? If you saw that on the internet, what would your first reaction be?
So personally, I'm on the data's making a huge difference side. But I think maybe what side you were on would stem from how you're collecting and using data. Okay. If I were trying to do quizzes every day, even if like 5 questions, it would be long, but if I were trying to do that every day and grade it and put it in my grade book, like that would suck. There's no way I'm going to enjoy that. That's going to suck a lot of my personal time if we have any of that at the end of the day. So that for sure I think would drive me out of teaching.
Right.
But when I think of the data, the stuff I'm using that's most valuable, it's the exit tickets, it's the whiteboards, it's the quick things. They're not always the things that are going in my grade book. It's the stuff that's telling me, what can I teach tomorrow? I'm not planning blind and hoping we're there and we'll just move on. Like I want some direction so I know what to plan for tomorrow. So it's quick to give to the kids and it helps me. My planning tomorrow is now easier because I know exactly where I want to go.
Right. So do you see them as separate things, kid data and teaching?
No, I think it's pretty embedded. Because I wouldn't know what to teach the next day.
Right.
If I didn't have those checks.
Okay.
I can't just go in and follow, what the book says. The textbooks are awesome. I love having resources.
Right.
But they're not teachers. They don't know my kids. This book has never met my child other than when they probably wrote their name in it somewhere.
Right.
So, I need direction on where and what am I going to take you? I know where I want you at the end of the year, but how am I going to get you there? And so these quick checks that are just embedded in what I'm doing help make my life easier because I know what to plan for.
When you lesson design for the day, do you plan these quick checks, these kid data checks?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Because it's too easy to just get carried away with the day. Like you said, missing closing. I was forever in the middle of a very epic math lesson. And then I get the call from the music teacher. Are you coming to special today?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. And you have to go apologize. We were just graphing and it was so awesome. And, I would get carried away. So for me, yes, I had to plan them to make sure that I got them in, because then by planning them and putting in my grade book, I remember, this is important. I got to do this.
I think a lot of new teachers that are first year teachers, maybe all the way through maybe 3rd or 4th year, they already are so overwhelmed with lesson design. Just making sure that the kids are moving a little bit, that the kids are talking, they're doing discussions, there's management things, but we really need to make sure that we tell all teachers, but especially those new teachers that I know they feel like there's 1,000 things they have to do. Plan.
Yeah.
Put some time in for, kid processing, think time, and kid data time. Like collection of kid data time. Like those are some major, that's an instructional essential.
Yes. Well, and it's going to make your life easier.
Right.
Because if you're just following along with what the textbook is, yes, the majority of your kids are probably going to get there by the end. But I think you're also going to start seeing a lot of behaviors and because you've lost some kids and
Right.
they don't know how to get themselves back on track. And if you're not assessing till the end, you may not even know that you've lost them yet. And that's why they're not keeping up with you and they're choosing not to pay attention at all because they're just lost already within the lesson. And so it would simplify your life. It would help you if you were monitoring along the way. You know, I think it would help with a lot of that.
It helps a lot. I love that you said that because I would argue that a lot of behavior issues really don't come from because you didn't have like the perfect Pinterest management plan. Or 5 or whatever they are. I think it's because we're not taking the time to engage kids, obviously, but also like check in. You know, you'll grab those kids if they know, hey, she cares enough to get me back on track. Because once they get lost, they're like, there's a whole slew of emotions happening there.
Right.
And a lot of that comes out behaviorally.
Sure.
Right?
It becomes overwhelming very quick. When I feel like I couldn't even keep up with my lesson plans for the week. Like I became overwhelmed very quick and I wanted to shut down.
Right.
You know, and the kids, it's the same way. They just don't have the language to express it typically the way we could so that we could, you know, go vent to a friend and get back on track. They express it by acting out.
Out or maybe trying to copy work or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to miss this or, you know, asking a friend.
Writing down whatever so they can say it's done, but not actually putting that effort in.
Yes.
So, you know, those kind of things.
And then at the end, you know, that you guys give the tests, right? We give the test. We think they got it because we really haven't really done many checks. And that's when you know, wait, I taught this. I swear I taught this. They all shook their heads and looked at me like they were getting it. You know, I think that's where a lot of that confusion comes from with just teaching in general. It's just realizing like I didn't do enough checks along the way to catch it before it happened. Yeah,
that's where kids data I think is so valuable to me because when I give that final assessment, I can almost always predict how they're going to do.
Right.
Because I know what parts they got all along. I know, you know, where this kiddo's about 3 lessons behind. We're still working on it.
Right.
So when I got those final assessments, very rarely was I surprised by the kids' scores. You know, so that to me is just the final, I want something for the grade book. I need my evidence.
Right.
But all along I've been watching where you're
watching them. You're like, okay, and you could even tell the kid, hey, you know, you did great. Like, I know we're still working on like these few things. I get that, but look at all the other stuff that you did along the way when they take that final assessment. Because even after we take those summative tests, I don't know if we talk to the kids about the summative tests. And I think sometimes, you know, just as important as talking to them about their kid data along the way, after a summative is over, you know, if we came back and said, hey, this was awesome. Look how many you got right. I know these were a struggle for you. This is awesome. I needed to know that. Let's keep working on it.
Yeah, and celebrate that success. They need that just like we do. We need to see that this is working.
Yeah, you know? This is working and we are moving towards mastery and we all move at different pace towards mastery and that whole growth mindset I think is really important when we're talking about just collecting that data.
Absolutely.
So, okay. And then you talked about the data-driven decisions are basically how we ensure that the students are learning. And that each standard is super complex and that you break it down into smaller chunks. How do you do that?
So I think like when you meet your PLC or even if you do it on your own, okay, this quarter we're looking at this standard. Well, when you read those standards, most of them are very complex.
Yeah,
even kindergarten and first grade are not real straightforward.
I'd like to talk to the people because
I bet you had a lot of people go with you to that meeting.
I know. I would be like, what? Because there's some that I honestly am like, these are different things. Like, why are they together? Okay, so
the standards are complex.
Right.
We're not going to sit down in 1 week and teach most of those to mastery. We look at it and we, you know, whether with effort or just naturally, we're like, okay, that means they've got to be able to do this, they've got to be able to do this, they've got to be able to do this. Like, we line up the things they've got to do.
Right.
And then we plan for that. Those are the things I teach, those things they've got to do so they get to that end goal.
Right.
So because I take that time and I break it down in my lessons, because they're important, I also need to take the time then to check those.
Right.
You know, there's a reason that I pulled those out as key skills within the standard. So I want to make sure along the way that they're getting those so that I know they'll be able to do that end standard when we get there.
Okay. I think one thing that comes to mind is we use ReadyGen in our district, and the kids read the same story several times. Sure. And I think at first, a lot of teachers and kids were like, why are we reading this same story 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's obviously come around now. We understand why we were doing that, but at first it was very like, what are we doing? Well, it was we were doing different skills each time.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We were looking at vocab one time, we were looking at plot characters one time. So it's breaking those ideas and concepts, key details out so that the kids, you know, I mean, the first time was probably just for comprehension,
right?
What's going on,
mm-hmm.
right? But it's hard to analyze something all in one go.
Sure. Well,
right?
We want the deeper understanding.
Mm-hmm.
We're not always looking at surface level. Who were the characters? Where were they?
Yes.
How was the problem solved? Like, we want to get kids to the point where they can look beyond that, and they're looking at motivation, and they're looking at themes, and they're, you know, and they're not doing that in kinder, of course, but
right.
they've got to learn that basic part because they're getting up into that.
Well, and they're getting into those analysis standards, like, why would the author use this color / frog / whatever we're looking at in order to create this theme? And so I think if you don't read it multiple times, you can't get to that point, right? So in between each of those readings would be perfect opportunities to do these kid data checks, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of our curriculum is built to have these moments for kid data. I know turn and talk is built in, right? How could a teacher collect data using the turn and talk? Because it's fast.
It is fast. So I would kind of looking ahead at the questions and think about, okay, these are the kiddos I'm kind of most interested in their answer, and make sure that that's where I place myself during those discussions. I know I'm not going to be able to hear everybody. That's not realistic.
It's not realistic.
But I also know who my big hitters are. Who do I for sure want to hear? You know, and I can place myself in position and then use that as my kid data for the day. Again, on my clipboard or post it.
Or, you know, even just you run back up and like you said, post it in the lesson plan book, like right there, right next to that turn and talk prompt, right?
Yep.
These kids, because, you know, we have those built in, those moments of time that are really locked in for kid data, but we might be like looking ahead to see what we're doing next. So it's just moving our own bodies and kind of just that pre-plan, like we talked about. Sure. Where am I going to insert myself so I can collect this data?
The teachers will probably find there's a lot of moments in the day that are like, oh, that would have totally worked.
Right.
I can put that in there, you know, use my clipboard there, use my post-it there. I don't have to add something additional.
Yes.
I really am already doing these. It's just about how do I utilize that question,
I think that's what I wanted. Out of everything we talked about, and we're going to wrap up in a little bit, but out of everything we talked about today, I really wanted teachers to come away with like, it's not extra time. It's there. It's just kind of reworking your brain to plan for it. Like there's opportunities, to take this. It's just making sure you're like, okay, here would be a natural place where I might have instead used that time to maybe take attendance, which also is important. Please take attendance. I'm also very guilty. I think this is a confession of my horrible teaching practices, but I also was very guilty of taking attendance too late. But, you know, or maybe making copies or doing something like, you know, setting up the next activity. Those are important, but we got to get the kid data.
Right.
We've got to monitor progress.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you heard of the My Favorite No activity?
Yes.
So I think that would also be, because you said something about you took the notes, your exit tickets, and you sorted them very quickly. So can you describe the My Favorite No activity?
I have seen it a couple times. I haven't done it, so I don't know how accurately I could.
Well, I've done it with thesis statements, but okay. So everybody imagine that you're writing an essay. So the kids, you'd put an essay prompt up, right? And the kids would like write a thesis statement based on that prompt, right? And I would always be like, okay, let's do like a 3-pronged thesis. So you'd have 3 ideas. Okay. And they'd all write on note cards, they pass them up. And then you can quickly sort the ones that got it. Whoa, no, whatever they, you know, right? And they watch it now they're off doing some other bell work. Maybe they're doing a retrieval practice, whatever they're doing. And then you call them back up as a whole class and you pick your favorite wrong answer. So this could be with math, this could be with English. So I might pick one that was like my favorite because like it was really well written. They were maybe just missing like one prong. Like they just only had 2 ideas and, you know, but so it was wrong. It's my favorite no though. So it's like, it's kind of a good thing. And obviously these are anonymous, but that's also a quick way to just collect some kid data and provide immediate feedback, right? So kids know, like, oh, I did that too.
Right. Well, and encouraging that reflection. It wasn't just I turned it in and it's over.
Right.
But let me actually think about what I turned in.
She's about to go through these, like, right now. You know, like, and it's kind of that immediate, like, okay. But again, it's not going in the grade book. I need to see where we're at on this, right? You could do it with attention getters. You could do it with math problems. Like, because a lot of kids would solve it, like, in different ways, right? And they'd be like, oh, this is my favorite. No, because, like, look, they solved it all the way to this point, but then what happened? Oh, we just put the wrong, put a plus instead of a minus or whatever, and then we just got the whole thing wrong. So I think that's also, I don't know why I just thought of that, but I just think that's also a really quick kid collection of data too, that showcases for kids, like, you're not the only one out there that's not getting it. Some of you may have also made this mistake, so let's go over it. Let's give some feedback on it right now, so you remember it, because we know in kids' attention spans very short, right? Okay, sure. So we've got this data. It's collected. It's either in a binder. It's either on a Post-it. It's in a clipboard. It's on a Padlet wall, right? It's in index cards. What are we doing with it? So we got to take it to our collective community of teachers, our professional learning community. So when I first started in Gilbert, PLCs really were getting together and lesson planning. I mean, that's what we did. The only data we would really ever look over was like a beginning of the year assessment versus an end of the year assessment, you know what I mean? That type of thing. But that was really it. We weren't looking at a lot of kid data. We just weren't. And so our new PLC data cycle starts with where, as a PLC, really instead of lesson planning, you're determining standards, like what's the standards we're teaching. And then you're developing those assessments ahead of time, so that backwards design, right? And those assessments can be tests, performance tasks, project-based, anything like that, but they're collectively, created. And then you're selecting the strategies that you're going to use that are going to target those standards. So maybe like, okay, we're going to use a jigsaw in this lesson area, and then maybe we're going to use a Foursquare or something in this other area. But just those high yield strategies and selecting those. And then the big thing is we deliver excellent tier 1 instruction, right? We're trying to get everybody on the boat. Okay, as much as we can. We know we can't get everybody. We're trying to get everybody on the boat using these strategies. Okay, then we come back into our PLC. And obviously, as we're teaching, we're monitoring and adjusting, and then we analyze those results. Where do you see the kid data fitting in the PLC data cycle the best?
So I think it would start with the delivery of instruction, because that's when you're going to give that kid data. You're going to collect that as you go, and then you're going to bring it to your PLC and monitor it together. Look at, you can look at together. Okay, your class has got it. Her class has got it. My class totally didn't get it. What did you guys do? Because I need to reteach it with my kids. So using each other. I don't have to go back and completely replan it all on my own. I clearly have 2 other experts already in my PLC because their kids got this part of the lesson that we were working on. And then so again, that goes into the results when you're analyzing too. It fits within your cycle. These little kid data checks that we're doing along the way are to meet that goal at the end of the PLC cycle. So if we can, work together and use each other's ideas, and we can build off of that and help our kids get to that goal, hopefully at the same time.
So Lindsay, what you're telling me is I do not have to bring a spreadsheet with test data to my PLC.
Only if you really, really love spreadsheets.
So I can bring Post-it notes with scribbles. I can bring a clipboard with check marks. I can bring a whiteboard with a bunch of kid stuff that they read. Okay. I could bring even like, a couple worksheets maybe that the kids were working on, right? So kid data is the real stuff. It's, the exit tickets with student handwriting. We're bringing that to our PLC.
Absolutely, because that's your actionable data. That's the stuff you can build off of, you can do things with. That's what PLC is meant to do. It's, helping you plan and grow your students. So it doesn't have to be different data or fancy data. The stuff that's already helping you educate your kids is what should be there.
Data. It doesn't have to be fancy data.
Fancy data.
We're definitely gonna coin that. When you come to PLCs, it doesn't have to be fancy data. It can be just run of the mill Post-it note data. But I think that's what we need to keep in mind. when we come to those PLC meetings, because like, let's say, for example, let's say we did pick the jigsaw and my kids didn't get it and your kids did. And we figure out through our conversation that when I did the jigsaw and I sent them off to the expert groups, when they came back, they didn't share or whatever
Right.
with their group, right? Or, you know, that I missed a step in the jigsaw process, or I ran out of time that day and I didn't get to that step. We never followed up with it. And you're like, no, that's like super key. Like if you do a jigsaw, you have to have them come back and present this, and all the other kids need to write it down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just had them present. I didn't have them write it down in their notes or whatever it is. That is the misstep. Those are the conversations that are going to bring the light bulbs that sometimes we just can't see when we're in the thick of it as teachers.
Sure.
That's the time where you're like, I think my kids got it because in the jigsaw, I just did these extra 2 things that just really seemed to help.
Right. And I mean, that's a great time to share those teachable moments, because as teachers, we do all of a sudden, the kids will be doing something in the lesson and you'll have this brilliant idea and you just throw it out there.
Yeah, you just see it happen.
And then you look at your data and you're like, it worked. So then you go to PLC. That's where you get to share that, because chances are the other members of your team didn't have the same brilliant brainstorm you did in that moment. But everybody can benefit from that. So you like, hey, I did this and I really think it works. You guys give it a try. Yeah. And
and that's being teaching,
that.
right? Everybody has their different styles. And so bringing that together, I mean, that's why collective teacher efficacy is so high in Hattie's research, because really you have to have that collective knowledge,
right,
to benefit all the kids.
Well,
right?
I'm not going to think of everything on my own.
No.
I'm not. I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I need everybody else's. I want to hear what they're doing, and I may either do it the same way they do, or maybe like, ooh, I can do that, but I can twist it, and that'll fit me better. And,
right.
But we need those ideas from each other to truly be successful, because I know I'm not going to think of everything on my own.
Awesome. Yeah, and then if you always bring post data, the lesson's over,
right?
The unit's over.
At that point, I'm hoping to move on. That's not the time to decide that, wait, I'm not ready.
At that point, you're selecting your new standards and you're going. And now your kids are left on the dock, like just waiting. Right? I don't know where this boat analogy came through halfway through this podcast, but here it is. So, all right. Awesome. So we are collecting data. We're doing it frequently, and we're just trying to do it as quick and easy as possible because teachers are busy.
Yep.
Right? But kids need to have their progress being monitored, and we also need that collective teacher brain power for those kids. So, okay, awesome. All right, we're going to do rapid fire. Are you ready? Okay. Your first question is data. So I'll say data because that's clearly your preferred. Data is, and then fill in the blank.
Essential for student growth.
Oh, I love that. Okay, good. What or who inspires you?
Teachers.
Yeah.
Nobody works harder or gives more of themselves than teachers do.
It's so true.
And yeah, every day, that's one of the best parts of coaching, is getting to watch teachers do what they do.
I know, one of the best parts, I miss my students a lot, right? But one of my favorite things to do is when I teach teachers something and they're like, I'm going to go use that tomorrow. And for me, it's like, yes, get it to the kids, because, you know, that's who inspires me, is I want those kids to just get whatever that's, because I know it's good. I know it's research-based. I know it'll work. And I love when teachers are like, I'm going to go do that. Who inspires me? Kids, and then teachers who are ready to just go. They're like, I'm going to go try that. If it fails, it's okay. I'm going to do it.
Just give it a go.
Yeah, I just love that. That always gets me just like super jazzed to teach again, you know, the next time. Okay, what is one piece of teaching advice that is either so bad you have to warn, we have to run, or is so amazing that you have to tell us?
Okay, so unfortunately, it's the bad that sticks out.
All right.
But my very first year of teaching, I was told when we would meet together to talk that the majority of my class was passing my test, so my test was too easy. that most of your students should not be able to pass the assessment. What? And that just kills me. I'm like, they really should all be able to pass the assessment, because that's my job. But this teacher, they were more like bell curve thinking, I think. And in their mind, like, they can't all pass. You must not have been teaching to the right level, or it must not have been hard enough, because they shouldn't all be able to get it. Yeah. And so that one has just always stuck with me, and always drives me crazy. Yeah. Because in my mind, everybody's going to reach that goal one way or the other. We're all getting there. That's the plan.
Lindsay's like, the bell curve. Ha ha ha. I laugh in the face of the bell curve.
Not having that.
Yeah, not having that. We're gonna all get there, and we're gonna do that. This is clearly why this is your
my
passion.
choice.
that. Okay, I see it. It's all coming together now. All right. What are your must-have smartphone apps?
I need Libby and Hoopla, my book apps, free reading apps from the library.
Ooh.
Right? They're free. Audiobooks, ebooks. It's awesome as long as you have a library card.
Well, now I just got real. Now I'm not going to work the rest of the day. I'm going to be going on the Libby and Hoopla. Okay. And
maps.
Okay.
I cannot be lost. I just can't. I cannot be lost.
Honestly, I'm such a millennial. I'm like, how did they deliver pizza before Google Maps? Like, I do not understand. But whatever. I understand. I look by my maps.
Yep.
Too. Okay. And then last song is, what song do you... Oh, last song. Well, I just gave it away. Last question. What song do you know all the lyrics to?
Pretty much most musicals. This Is Me, The Greatest Showman came to mind, but I will not be singing it for you, so please don't ask.
That's okay. This Is Me is like an anthem.
Yes.
It's so good. I don't know if she's in my office right now. Sound of Music is my favorite musical. I just grew up with it, and I will say I love that. That's why I know all the lyrics to all the songs.
Yeah, I love big epic musical numbers.
Okay.
That's my thing.
If listeners want to learn more about how to collect frequent student data, are there any resources where they can find? Because I'm going to link them in the show notes on the podcast website. You have any resources?
So honestly, I get most of mine through Google,
well,
and then you vet the source,
yes,
of course.
Right.
But so I did share 2 sites that you can link down below. These I liked because they were just lists of ideas. These are different ideas you can use to get quick, frequent data.
Nice.
And to me, I like that straightforward. Just tell me what I can do.
My
planning time, I want it to not make my week 70 hours. So how do we make it quick?
Right.
And so my current 2 right now, Better Lesson has some great stuff. And then the NWEA blog had some really good ideas and resources.
I like those that just give it to you because it's like you go on Pinterest and you want the recipe and you have to read the blog post first. And you're like,
I always jump to the recipe.
Like, I love it. You're talking about your food and I appreciate you, but no, I just want the recipe.
Yes. No, I'm very to the point. And my other resource would be your instructional coach.
Yeah.
Put in a personal.
So yeah, if you're at Gilbert
coaches are knowledgeable
you can
and
get
ready to help.
Instructional coach. Yeah, and they can help you. And even reach out to your tie if you're like, hey, I want to use some tech with this. They could probably give you some quick tips too on some exit tickets. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming on today. It was so wonderful to talk to you about this.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
All right.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about frequent kid data and collecting that in your classrooms. If you have listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting the Employee Hub page through the GPS portal and navigating to Professional Growth, and then selecting PGD's podcast Google site. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Audible. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under Playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation with your students. Stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you next time.